Perhaps one of the most impressive things to come out of FNAF is its thriving fan game scene. The FNAF fan game market is so saturated that GameJolt has its own subcategory dedicated to them, and I think that's fantastic. I think it's great that FNAF has inspired a generation of young artists and game developers to put their work out there. There are so many compelling, creative, interesting, passionate fan works out there. It's really impressive. But the one I want to talk about today is none of the above. The Return to Freddy's, if you're unaware, is a series of infamously bad FNAF fan games mired in drama and plagiarism. If you want an idea of the kind of thing we're talking about, the first game was released on GameJolt under the title Five Nights at Freddy's 3. Also important to note is that this was before FNAF 3 came out, and in order to avoid confusion, Scott contacted the creator and told him to change the name. So that's what we're working with. The first game largely consists of incomprehensible mechanics, assets ripped directly out of FNAF 1 and 2, and these very 2014 chic edits, which were not the creations of the developer. And this is also the first ever game to feature Candy of Five Nights at Candy's. Yes, among all the other plagiarized assets in this game is Candy, who existed solely as Emil Mako's personal OC at this point. He is creatively renamed to Sugar for this one. And a fun fact for you, Five Nights at Candy's actually exists because Emil wanted to assert his ownership over Candy after this fiasco, so thanks TRTF, I guess you did give us something good in the end. But that is not the end of the story, because The Return to Freddy's is a franchise. There are not 2, not 3, but 4 mainline entries in this thing, and they're all as terrible as you can imagine. And that's not all. This series is not limited to games. Like its forefather FNAF, it has branched out into the realm of literature. And this book... The Return to Freddy's The Dreadful Truth fascinates me. It haunts me. I've reread the first chapter countless times at this point. It's so horrifically terrible I lose my shit every time I read it, but I've never really read past the 3rd chapter, and honestly I don't really know why. I guess I've been saving it for a rainy day, and that day has finally come. My last 2 videos required a lot of writing and analysis and engagement with some of the most annoying people in the FNAF fandom. Don't worry, Fandom Follies is still very much continuing. I just wanted to take a little pause because it is kind of taxing on my well-being. So today I'm giving myself a break by making this very simple, silly video where I share this masterpiece of literature with you all. I consider myself something of a bad literature enthusiast, and this one has flown under the radar for far too long. Hopefully you find this as entertaining as I do. So without further ado, let me spin you a tale. This book has an opening quote, which I find conceptually very funny. "Life is nothing but a butterfly's dream." Sounds deep. I looked it up and couldn't find a source for it, so I assume it's a creation of the authors, which amazes me, because it sounds like something of literary merit, a trait not shared with anything else in this book. Chapter 1. On March 25th of 1942... On March 25th of 1942... Okay, I need to pull myself together. On March 25th of 1942, there was a secret Japanese government facility located on the other side of the world called Gilbert Facility. It was a hospital that held a secret project that was meant to save people from a severe super cancer that was contagious. There was sadly no cure. Okay, so there's already so much to unpack here. First of all, I think I should mention that this is less of a novel than it is like a Wikipedia article. The majority of it is just describing events in a very objective, omniscient fashion instead of really showing actual scenes. Second of all, a severe super cancer that was contagious. Just that phrase alone just should really give you a great idea of the kind of thing we're in for. Honestly, this might have been a premonition considering how much cancer has become a plot point in recent FNAF. So since there's no cure to the super cancer, the scientists come up with a new idea. They're gonna try to transfer the souls of the patients into robotic vessels so they can live on. They were strapped onto the hospital bed for safety precautions, and were knocked out with a shot so that they wouldn't feel anything during the process. They used this soul extraction machine thing to place the souls of 3 patients into the animatronics, whose names are Ty, Coley, and Sally. The 3 patients have been saved from the super cancer! It's then mentioned after this that there was also a prototype liquid antidote codenamed Radsla, but it wasn't used because they thought it might exacerbate the virus. But, like, if they were gonna die anyway, why not at least try it? Like, I feel like if it were me, I'd rather chance that than live forever in a cold metal body. That could just be me, though. On January 4th of 1943, the owner of Gilbert Facility, Gilbert, was very ill. Alay, the son of Gilbert, was there when his father later passed away from old age. Well, that was abrupt. First, I like how the story provides very specific dates for something that you would think occurred over a span of time. Like, it sounds like he was only very ill on that specific day, and then he died too. Second, apparently Gilbert is so self-centered that he named this facility after his own first name. Also, isn't this in Japan? Shouldn't he have a Japanese name? Gilbert says he wants to live forever so he could see the super cancer be cured. So his son decides to build a giant supercomputer and then use the soul extraction thingy so he can live on in the giant machine forever, like GLaDOS kind of thing. This works for some reason and everyone is happy. After this, Gilbert Facility receives a call coming from America, the voice of whom is said to sound as if he is looking for an inside job, whatever that means. He asks if he can buy the machine and the son says it's not for sale and hangs up. In America. It's in brackets. When Alay hung up on the head boss of the mafia drug gang, Allison, he was pissed. He wore a red trench coat, blue jeans, and a white fedora. He told the gang, "Pack your bags, we're going to Japan." Aren't we during like World War II right now? Can the mafia drug gang boss known as Allison take a commercial flight to Japan? What necessitated even having the facility be in Japan, actually? It could have just been in like California. And like, far be it from me to nitpick a story this incoherent, but the author chose to set his story in a notoriously Axis country during World War II. Like, that's a really specific detail, you'd think it would be relevant. So Allison's mafia drug gang goes to Japan, and they track down where the cellular communications were coming from. I do have to say, this mafia drug gang is quite shrewd. Then Allison calls the son again, and his dialogue is amazing. "Hey buddy, it's me. Remember? You declined my offer, and it was gonna be millions. Something that would be worth using to upgrade your tech. But instead, I'm left with a decline. You know how much I hate declined offers that are good." I can't explain it. This dialogue just has such a good je ne sais quoi to it. Now is a good time to say I love Allison. He's like my favorite character in all of this. Like, he's so unnecessarily cartoonishly evil. Then the gang goes in and uses like EMPs to shut off all the lights, and LA wakes up trapped in the office. The narrator walks up to the window of the office. Who's the narrator? Aren't you the narrator? The narrator says, No one declines a good offer. So thank you for dragging my ass down here. I'll take what will rightfully be mine. Have fun dying alone. I'll be sure to send a goodbye gift by shutting down your facility and your project to save everyone. So I guess the narrator is Allison, but I don't know why he was randomly called that in this passage. Like, it's not a bad title, but I feel like it has to be earned. Alay and the rest of the scientists are killed and the gang leaves, but with no mention of the machine, even though I thought that was the entire reason they were there in the first place. Did you just want to kill them now? I mean, it's not out of character. But then on the way out, Allison finds the Radsla antidote, resulting in perhaps the best line in the whole story. An antidote being run for tests that is supposed to cure the super cancer virus, but has side effects like itchy throat, lightheaded, 90% immortality, and loss of sperm. What does 90% immortality even mean? Like, you're immune to 90% of things? Is it a 90% chance of immortality? Like, I feel like we need a unit of measurement to quantify this. I feel like immortality is like a one-size-fits-all thing. Like, you're immortal, you're not. Imagine if pharmaceutical ads on TV were like this. There's just videos of ladies in yoga pants, and it's like, may cause immortality. Amazing, 10 out of 10, no notes. So they all go back to America, and now it says they have the machine with them. This makes me ask another question. How did they transport this across the ocean? Is it considered a carry-on? Also, it says that they have full control over the business, whatever that means. They decide that with their newfound power, they're gonna open a chain of children's entertainment restaurants under Fazbear Incorporated. But this wasn't for the kids. It was for the money. How duplicitous. I don't know, I feel like if I was a ruthless mob boss and I had access to this amazing technology, my master plan wouldn't be to create children's pizza-tainment chains, especially when I'm apparently a drug kingpin. Actually, maybe I would. This could be like a Gus Fring situation. The first restaurant they open is called Goldie Para Diner, which is the name if I've ever heard one. As weeks went by, the narrator's greed grew stronger and stronger. He put up a for-hire sign for Fazbear Inc., and quite a lot of people were hired that day. That doesn't sound that greedy to me. He's supplying the people with jobs. Allison's just out here running an honest business and invigorating the economy during these war times. Allison then hires the Green Jester, also known as his real name Gron, to work at the restaurant. I'd be pissed if my nickname was the Green Jester, but let me tell you, this Green Jester guy, he's a real American hero. He's a full-time, hard-working father with a loving wife and 2 kids. That's a strong man right there. But his friend Vincent, who also inexplicably works here, oh, he's not like Gron, he's a real slacker. Also, if the name Vincent also set off alarm bells for you, you're not alone. But Allison, oh, he doesn't like this. He doesn't like this one bit. When things don't go his way, he gets this urge to force control upon those who don't behave. So he decides that if you're slacking off at work, your first punishment is to be dragged behind the torture wall and forced to join the torture cult, and your second punishment is to be put in the torture suit and die from head to toe, as opposed to dying in just the toe. I imagine this is what happens if you go to the bathroom at an Amazon fulfillment center. But then he just doesn't do that to Vincent, even though that was what inspired this whole thing to begin with. Then one day Vincent and Gron get suspicious of Allison and follow him behind the torture wall. They see that all the employees are being abused and forced to worship this giant palm tree looking thing called the torture device. They try to break the machine to stop the production of the torture suits, but for some reason this corrupts it and makes it worse. I thought it was possessed by Gilbert, what? But then Allison comes back and sees them and then runs at them, and then they trap him inside and just run away. The narrator pounded on the door yelling at them, and as Gron and Vincent ran away, they heard screams, the sound of blood splatter and flesh being ripped. From that day forward, they only found out they were working for a monster doing the devil's deed. I feel like the devil's deed sounds like an innuendo for sex. Is that just me? Also, Allison is inexplicably still alive, so I don't know what the whole mutilation sounds were for. Anyway, the story continues on a completely unrelated thread. One day, Goldie Para Diner receives a shipment of animatronics they didn't order, including Golden Frankbert and Golden Kitty Fast Cat. Frankbert is such a funny name for an animatronic. I wish FNAF's animatronics were just named boring, mundane names like that. Like, instead of Bonnie and Chico, we could have, like, Steven and Lisa. Also, in case you're wondering, Kitty Fast Cat is just knockoff Cindy. So then the owner, who I thought was Allison, but I guess is someone else, hides them under a rug. Like, I feel like that's a lot to quite literally sweep under the rug. Then again, we abruptly cut away to something completely unrelated. 3 employees decide to investigate floor 9 since it's off limits. They open the door and heard as it creaked open, and inside they see the Beast, Torture Buster, and Torture Saber werewolf animatronic. They also see other grotesque and gruesome things. It's spelled like Gru, like from Despicable Me. Then Allison shows up and he graces us with more of his amazing dialogue. I thought I said this room was off limits, Did you really think you could get away with this? This is my factory, my rules, and you didn't play by my rules. Every time he speaks, I gain a year of my life. I feel like the author definitely thinks this sounds very cool and very intimidating. Then Allison starts to beat them with a pipe, and they try to hide in the torture suits, but then it automatically deploys torture mode, and they die in the suits and possess them. And then we cut back again to Gron, and him and his family are going to Goldie Para Diner for a Christmas celebration. Like, I don't know about you, but I feel like I wouldn't bring my wife and kids to my place of work where my boss secretly runs a torture cult behind the walls. But then, before he can even get out of the driveway, his car gets crashed into, and they're all really badly injured, and the driver steps out, and it's Allison. Oh my god, this man. You will learn from this and learn not to fuck with me and my business ever again. But then, he doesn't even stop there. He gets one of his goons to go to the hospital and disguise himself as a doctor and pulls the plug on Gron's wife. Gron saw a glimpse of this happen as he was opening his eyes and yelled, "No!" There's no exclamation point. He was really sad about it, I guess. Then the doctors come in and try to save his wife, but aren't able to. After this, they inexplicably say that Gron's youngest child has to be sent to foster care for some reason. At first I thought it was because Gron wasn't in a stable enough condition to raise them, but immediately after this he's discharged and goes home with the older son, so goodbye, other child, I guess. Figure your own life out. And then the part after this is so confusing. Gron gives his son an old hat of his as a Christmas present and then tucks him into bed. And then the narration says that he didn't want his child to see him in pain, so he leaves a note informing his son that he's leaving him by himself. Then the son is drawn to an unopened Christmas gift box by the voice of his mother, and Chapter 2 just ends. So that was confusing, but I have to say I'm enthralled. Chapter 3. So we're back with Gron, and he's gonna meet Vincent at Goldie Para Diner. Also, he's hallucinating whispers in his head, just saying the prophecy repeatedly. Then he goes inside and he sees an illusion of a little boy hilariously wearing a fedora leading him to the back of a restaurant. Apparently this is supposed to be his child self, so I guess that's what the hat thing was about. Then Vincent grabs him and snaps him out of his trance, and his dialogue is also really funny. He's like, he's a real good friend. He's a real man's man. Like, he's a pal. Gron, buddy, can you hear me? Snap out of it, buddy. I'm sorry, Vincent. I don't know what's wrong with me. Hey, it's okay. You started acting really strange, and I just want to be sure that my pal is in an A-OK condition. Now, shall we get that drink you wanted? This is like a kid's pizza restaurant. I like how he's talking like it's beer, but then it's just like Sprite. Okay, I thought the part before was confusing, but this next part is even more confusing. A content warning for suicide, because this story has a bizarre fascination with using it as a plot point. Gron follows his hallucinated child self to the back room with the golden suits in them, and then the hallucination graphically commits suicide. Then the voice in his head saying the prophecy gets louder, and Gron climbs into the golden Frank Birch suit and kills himself, but then presumably his agony, I guess, causes the suit to come back to life, and it's not very clear if he's like possessing it, like Springtrap, or if he's literally just alive in the suit. Then all the employees force him into a storage closet, and the owner tells them to never speak of it again, his rationale being that there'd be no way of explaining such an event to the police. They would think we're completely nuts and potentially drunk. The way this sentence is structured makes it seem like it's worse that the police would think that you're drunk than you're crazy. Vincent thinks something is afoot, so he goes to Gron's house and nobody answers the door. He kicks his way inside, and the son has both hanged himself and slit his wrists. Like, okay, I know this has been, like, funny laugh so far, but it's not a joke anymore. This is genuinely really tasteless. So after this, without Gron, the diner falls into disrepair, and the police come looking for him. They find the suit with his body presumably inside, but they just leave it there because they don't want to cause damage. That's your job! Actually, that's fairly accurate to the police in real life. By the way, I just want to say that I don't know why they think their story was so crazy. Man commits suicide by robot after tragically losing his family is hardly the weirdest thing to happen in this story. After this, Goldie Para Diner decides to rebrand into Frank Bert's Pizza and use the Frank Bert and Kitty Fast Cat characters as the main mascots. Unfortunately, because of the reputation of the restaurant, they don't run a very successful business, and to make matters worse, the food there was stale, and the quality of the drinks weren't too great. Also, I was looking on the wiki, and apparently this was like an animatronic strip club. What? Then suddenly, we jump back to our friends at Gilbert facility in Japan, which I didn't think still existed since they stole the machine and the immortality potion. But apparently it does, and the surviving scientists are trying to find a way to bring Alay back to life. They succeed, but when he comes back, he's crazy, and he tries to kill everyone, so they lock him up. So then they need a security guard to stay the night shift, and the scientist named Chai Tun shows him how to work everything in the office. On one hand, I'm glad we finally have an Asian name at this Japanese facility, but on the other, I feel like it sounds more Chinese than Japanese. So the scientist leaves and the security guard's by himself, and then Allison starts hacking the facility and turning the animatronics against him. Then he has the idea of letting crazy Alay loose, and the security guard decides to shoot a propane tank to kill both of them, even though he had a gun in the scene and he could have just shot Alay. I get being hesitant about shooting Alay, but like, if you were gonna shoot the propane tank, then everyone would die. It would be a lose-lose situation. Because of this, Gilbert facility is shut down and Allison is riding high. Oh, also there's apparently this plot point about how Gilbert facility and Fazbear are like competitors. Like, I'm sure they don't like each other because of the whole stealing the robot that is their founder and killing several people thing, but why are they business rivals? Gilbert facility is seemingly some kind of medical research center, and Fazbear is a children's entertainment franchise. That'd be like saying that Apple's biggest rival is Disney. Anyway, we then flash forward 41 years to 1985, and now Fredbear's Family Diner is a thing, and it's run by Vincent. I guess the whole watching his best friend horrifically die in an animatronic suit before his death was callously covered up didn't put him off this whole operation. Oh, and the fact that he knows this company is a front for a torture cult. So they need a new night security guard for the restaurant, and they hire this guy named Jefferson. Jefferson was an alright employee. He hasn't really been doing his job. Instead, he goes out of his office and plays the arcade machines while eating the leftover pizza in the employee's lunch fridge. This doesn't sound alright, it just sounds bad. Either way though, dream job, honestly, just getting paid to sit around and eat pizza and play games all night. Then we abruptly cut away to Allison, who's being evil as ever. He decides to track down Gron's younger son, who, if you'll recall, was placed in foster care. Apparently he grew up and had a child of his own, so I guess that was the point of that plot contrivance. The narration tells us that Allison knew everything about Jackson through Gron. His last name, favorite food, etc. Like, no shit you know his last name, you don't need to know anything about him to know his last name. Also, I like that the author could only come up with 2 factoids Allison knew about Jackson, one of which is the least intimate detail imaginable. So Allison pulls up to Jackson's house and is like, I know all about you. In fact, I knew your biological father, which is quite the introduction. Imagine someone you've never met approaching you and saying, I know all about you. Apparently this is not of concern to Jackson, who lets him in, and then Allison says, you and your family have left a mark on my life, and that mark has changed my life forever, and I'd like to return the favor. Am I the only one who fails to understand why Allison hates Gron so much? Like, I think the worst thing he did was try to break the machine, but that didn't even work. Then again, I don't know why I'm even questioning Allison's logic at this point, considering his entire motive so far has just been to be evil. Anyway, Allison kills Jackson and his child comes home and some neighbor lady adopts him since his father is dead and his mother is estranged. Anyway, back to Fredbear's. Vincent is like, Jefferson, we have to have a talk, and calls him out for being a useless employee before subsequently firing him. Honestly, if I were him, I couldn't even be mad. I'd just be impressed that he let me get away with that for so long. Then, Vincent is happy that his business is successful, but then, he sees the little ghost boy Gron, who's specified to be wearing a fedora again. It's not a avant-garde fashion choice. And then the narration just says that the prophecy won't end until someone stops Allison. How did you reach this conclusion? What? Also, why do you know about the prophecy? What? Also, who prophesied this prophecy to begin with? Like, the mechanics of this prophecy are very confusing. Regardless, he follows the ghost child to the parts and service room, and then he realizes he has to resist the call. So, he kicked it in the gut, punched it, threw it, abused it all over. Then the child climbs into the Frankbird suit, which is called the Lockjaw suit now for some reason, and the spring locks go off and kill him, and Vincent realizes that it was actually a real normal child, and he just killed a real little boy and not a vengeful spirit, and wow. Beautiful. Vincent, you were actually the worst. You're terrible. Despite ostensibly feeling very guilty for the death of this small child, he then just decides to leave it there and walk away, and tells his employee to put out the help wanted sign like nothing happened. Like, okay, you got over that one pretty quickly. Vincent is so unfazed at this point, like he barely even reacted to his best friend committing suicide in front of him. Right when Nathan grabbed the sign from the supply closet, someone walked up to Nathan and asked a question. Hey, are you hiring? I'm Conoth Kotz, by the way. Conoth Kotz. Conoth Kotz. What else is there to say? Wow. So he goes over to talk to Vincent about applying, and he just immediately hires him, like no interview or anything. Maybe that's why his last night guard was so useless. Conoth, oh, I can't say his stupid name. Conoth starts his first night, and the ghost child comes to life, and he starts haunting all the animatronics. Then Allison calls out of nowhere and tells him that he has, like, a rubber Halloween mask he can use, but then says if he's allergic to latex, he probably shouldn't use it. Unfortunately, as it happens, Conoth is in fact allergic to latex. What a tragic coincidence. Honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if Allison learned this factoid about Conoth before he worked here and made sure it was a latex mask just to fuck him over. So Conoth works 3 nights before randomly on the 3rd day there's a scene described in which a kid tears the hands off of Sugar, who, if you'll recall, is plagiarized candy. This plot point doesn't go anywhere and means nothing. It was really random. Also, another random thing I wanted to mention was that Conoth says he has to put food on the table for his kids, but the Return to Freddy's wiki, which I'm reading this off of, says he's a 19-year-old college student. He's my age and has multiple kids. I have to give him some serious props for apparently being a full-time student, full-time parent, and part-time employee at the worst company known to man. On night 5, Conoth is attacked by all the animatronics at once and barely survives before the clock strikes 6. He decides that enough is enough, and then when everyone comes in to open up shop, he slapped a pink slip on Vincent's chest. Don't you get a pink slip when you're fired? Like, that's not something you give someone when you want to quit. Then we flash forward another 30 years to 2015. It's so abrupt, I don't think there's even a chapter break. So now Freddy's is moving to a new shitty building because the old one got shut down because ghost, and Mike is gonna work here as the security guard, apparently having come here from the previous location and deciding this was a good idea because the newspaper said they fixed the animatronics. This is made doubly confusing by the fact that Vincent apparently knows Mike well and he's his best worker. By the way, I'd like to point out that Vincent is probably like 90 by this point, and that's if I'm being generous with his age. I guess he changed his slacking ways because he's really putting in the hours now. So Mike works his first night at the location, and the ghost child possesses all the animatronics and starts making them tear themselves up as a desperate cry for help. I actually like this as a concept. It's really sad and a good way to express the pain of the ghost children. But I can't take it seriously right now because it's in the context of the dumbest story ever written. Also, it just dawned on me that this is probably rationale for why the sprites randomly changed from the classics to the withereds during the first Return to Freddy's game. As I said, most of it was lifted from FNAF 1 and 2, so there was hardly any wiggle room there. Mike is plagued by nightmares of the animatronics and then receives a call from Vincent, who tells him that he keeps seeing the ghost of Gron's wife, asking him why he didn't stop Jackson from being sent to foster care, which is the same question that I asked, so I'm glad it's not going unaddressed. At the same time though, I don't know why it's Vincent's fault since he wasn't even there and he didn't even know. The phone call then cut to a static and hung up. Mike was worried for Vincent and was scared that he had died. Then Mike officially decides to quit because the prophecy kept lurking its way towards the end of humankind and will keep going until someone kills Allison. Why do you know about the prophecy too? What? Explain this prophecy, someone, please. Then he apparently disappears into the night, never to be seen again. After this, we cut to 3 teenagers named Blake, Chun, and Wilson. They love Freddy's and decide they want to become franchisees. Unfortunately, Vincent is a bit dead, so the Fazbear franchise is as well, so they decide to use the old Frankfurt's Pizza to rebuild it. While Chun and Wilson go to scavenge for relics from old Fazbear locations, Blake assisted to be taking the night shift in case anyone was around. Wilson calls Blake up and they talk about what they want to make the restaurant, and Wilson suggests making it a fantasy land, whatever that is. We could add some rides, more arcade machines, shows, cotton candy, anything fantasy-ish that you can think of. Yeah, because when I think of fantasy, I think of fairly basic theme park attractions. Like, that's the most magical thing you could think of. Oh, by the way, we're on chapter 8 of 9 now. I know I haven't really been keeping track of chapter breaks, but they've always been in such weird places that it really breaks the flow of the story to mention them. Then again, in a story this disjointed, I don't even know what constitutes a break of flow. So to pass the time, Blake plays, like, Angry Birds on his phone, and then his phone dies and the power doesn't work, so he decides to go explore the building. There's a music box playing a creepy song and he thinks he's being pranked, but then Bonnie, who's here now for some reason, attacks him. And then Kitty Fastcat, who's also here, I guess, and then she attacks him and she corners him. Blake then does, like, an action hero slide underneath her, which I'm struggling to visualize. Are her legs not super wide? Like, unless she has, like, a really wide stance, I feel like you'd have to be incredibly skinny to pull that off. Oh wait, it said that he was just, so she jumped at him, and then while she was jumping, he slid under. Still, that's very impressive. Either way, he gets into the office, and then he activates this force field thing to make it so the animatronics can't see him. It's like how the safe room works in FNAF, but in that it's not stupid, because it's always active in their system. Then he just goes to sleep, and I don't know about you, but if there was no physical barricade between me and the monsters trying to kill me, I would not be sleeping that night. After this, Blake wakes up, and he's like, gaslit by his friends into thinking that he wasn't attacked, even though wouldn't they have seen that the animatronics were out of place, like they moved? Anyway, apparently they now have the rest of the core 4, including Lockjaw, so now the ghost is here. By the way, where's Golden Freddy in all of this? Fredbear's Family Diner was a thing in this, so he should be here, but he just isn't. I guess Lockjaw replaced him. Also, saying that, it just dawned on me that it didn't make sense for the animatronics to attack him before, because the ghost wasn't there yet. So then he works another night, and the animatronics all go crazy. The next day, his friends notice he seems nervous, but he left to them because he had to do what was best for the situation. Why is that best for the situation? Well, if the animatronics are malfunctioning, I feel like they'd want to know so they could do something about it. And clearly I was right, because after a while, the restaurant opens, and on the first day, Lockjaw, I kid you not, hugs 6 kids to death. He hugged them to death. It's a very whimsical type of murder. And then, it gets even more insane, because the government then steps in and bans animatronics because of this one freak accident. That's like saying we should ban all cars because of one car accident. Also, I guess this means a lot of Disneyland rides are going to become screen rides, which is really unfortunate. They demolish the restaurant and the ghost of the Lockjaw child and his 6 victims are all freed, which, you know, kind of anticlimactic. But because Allison isn't dead, the curse continues. Finally, we are on chapter 9. I have to say, I'm very hyped for the epic conclusion to this parable. You really don't know what's coming next, it's such a page-turner. We cut ahead 15 years, so now it's 2030, I guess, and Blake, Chun, and Wilson are all roommates, and there's also some guy named John who's their friend now.
And they were roommates.
Oh my god, they were roommates.
I headcanon them as a gay polycule. Wilson decides they want to try the pizza restaurant thing again, so they go to this old TV studio for Fazbear where they recorded a show called Captain Frankfurt and His Scurby Crew, which doesn't even make any sense. Frankfurt's not even a pirate, he's just like some dude in a hat. Wilson then has this incredibly funny line. You want to take the night shift again while we contact Fazbear Inc. and City Hall to settle something out with the government? 1. Why would you think that's a good idea? 2. Is this like national legislation? Is Wilson representing the animatronic lobby right now? And then we get this even funnier exchange. Hey Wilson, how are things going with settling things with the government? He just says that casually, like, yeah, you know, as you do. Wilson responded with, could say I have never imagined it to be this complicated. Wait, never mind. We just settled things out. They said they'll release the notice one last time. If we fuck up, game over. 1. Why did you not think this would be complicated? You're trying to repeal legislation right now. And 2, why did you think this process would take an afternoon? I feel like this should be taken to the Supreme Court. Like, I feel like this is like a multi-year process. So they've very effectively repealed this legislation, and now they can make their animatronic restaurant. If only the right to petition was this efficient in real life. Everything would get done so much quicker. And their new restaurant is called Freddy Fazzy Fun Time, which, again, is an incomprehensible name. This does predate Sister Location and FNAF World, though. After this, the Lockjaw and Kitty Fastcat animatronics activate because their AI is evil or something. And then, wait, isn't this the place supposed to have been demolished with all the other animatronic restaurants? Whatever. So then Kitty Fastcat jumps down the hall to surprise the kids. But there weren't any kids. Her system makes her say, let's surprise the kids. But instead, it glitched to, let's kill the kids. That's pretty hardcore. My blood runs cold. Then all of a sudden, Sally and Coley, who were the animatronics from Gilbert facility, come out too. Now, this is what I'm talking about when I refer to Chekhov's gun. I don't know how or why they're in America, but you know they're here. Wait, why didn't they get blown up and get... I don't know why I'm questioning anything anymore. So after this, Wilson calls Blake, and he says that they found the Golden Frank Bridge suit, which, if you remember, is the one that Gron killed himself with and possessed. Also, I learned that apparently in the original game, Gron ends up in the suit because he slipped on a bar of soap and fell into it, and I have to say I'm very sad that that detail was retconned. Blake then lies about his safety again, and I don't understand why, especially now because they're on such thin ice. It's even more imperative now than before that they know the animatronics are dangerous, because, like he said, if they fuck up, they don't have another chance. That night, Blake hears a man screaming and goes to investigate. Then the man says, "Where the fuck are you?" Then he sees that it's Golden Frank Burton. He obviously has a human body inside him, and the sentence is punctuated with, "It smelled really bad, to the point Blake wanted to throw up." It reminds me of in The Twisted Ones when Springtrap makes his grand appearance and Jessica just says that he smells. Unfortunately, this is the end of Blake, because Gron, thinking he's Allison, shoves him in the Golden shoves him in the Golden Kitty Fastcat suit, which is also here for some reason, and he dies a horrific death. Gron then disappears into the night to track down Allison and end him once and for all. Wilson and Chun and John, who I'd kind of forgot about, came back the next day and find Blake dead, and they call the police, and the detective is Carson, who's Gron's grandson, the one whose dad was killed by Allison, if you recall. Then he's like, so many deaths and disappearances have been linked to Fazbear. This business has been around for almost 100 years now, and you're just now thinking to look into it? Like, maybe Allison has some cops on the inside. He is a mafia boss, after all. Or, sorry, a mafia drug gang boss. All along, the Return to Freddy's was just a story about police corruption. The story comes to an end on these touching lines. It was the year of 2035, and the investigator was on his way to a rip-off location called Frankbert's, which was a secret criminal institution disguised itself as a children's restaurant for laying low. But that didn't stop the investigator, Carson. It's all capitalized. He went up to the building with his gun to shoot the criminal gang down that was linked to Fazbear Incorporated to end it all for good. And Finn. I have to say I'm a bit disappointed by the finale. It was kind of anticlimactic. I assumed this was meant to be like teasing the 5th game, and that was where this story would resolve, but if you're unaware, The Return to Freddy's 5 had the most turbulent cycle of development of any game ever, and was cancelled and reimagined countless times. Fortunately, The Return to Freddy's wiki, just another day in freddy.fandom.com, has documented all of this very diligently, so allow me to give this story a more satisfying resolution. By the way, this is one of my favorite websites ever. Once every few months I just browse the pages like I'm looking at Instagram. It's like 6 degrees of Wikipedia, but for insane people. Okay, so just looking at the Return to Freddy's 5 page is already giving me so much whiplash. There's a really long preamble at the start from the editors explaining that a large amount of content from TRTF5 is lost media, and that if you have content related to it that you believe to be inaccessible anywhere else, then upload it to the wiki for archival. Like I said, the curators of this wiki have done a remarkably good job of documenting all of this, so on the off chance that you do think you have Return to Freddy's lost media, then I'll leave a link in the description so you can go ahead and contribute. The plot synopsis is that you're an investigator. It is the year 2036. Everyone but you step down a cold case of the mysteries and murders of Fazbear Inc. You are alive. Okay. You are the child from the past. Which is vague, but yeah, it seems to pretty much be what I was saying, directly continuing off the events of the book. Since this page mostly just chronicles the development of the game, which is honestly way more interesting than the actual story, I will instead look at the page for the endings, of which there are 9. Okay, so the first one has more child suicide, yay, so content warning for that. The Lockjaw child, who I learned is apparently canonically named after the developer of the game, takes his own life. There's also no context for this, so it's just like presented as if this is a natural way for the story to end. The next one is like Happiest Day in FNAF 3, where all the masks of the kids slowly drop to the ground, which confuses me because I thought only the Lockjaw kid was responsible for the hauntings. I guess the rest of the missing children are here too. Then after that, there's this really weird one, where the Lockjaw child has this like Evangelion-esque conversation with Shadow Torture Lockjaw, who apparently exists. Someday I might just have to do a full Return to Freddy's 5 deep dive, because this is all so enrapturing. Allow me to dramatically narrate this for you. Imagine this is like Misato Evangelion's voice. What is it that you're afraid of? Are you afraid of yourself? You're afraid of hurting others. You're afraid of losing close ones. You're afraid of being alone. That's the problem, isn't it? When close ones say how much they care about you and that you're never alone, you still feel alone inside. You're not open. What worries me is that you talk to yourself and consider your subconscious as your close friend. Something inside is hurting you. You're hiding it. Never told anyone. Never told to a single soul. Something is worrying you. You need to open up to the others. Let them get in. And get rid of me. You try and try, but every day, every night, every second, every minute, and every hour, you always feel alone. You cry for yourself to sleep every night. You feel hopeless and not even therapy or the professional therapists fixed you. You're broken inside. You tried getting rid of yourself, but something held you back. And that thing, or person, is your core. You will be alright. Just give it time. You'll be out of here soon. Very soon.
Congratulations! 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 Congratulations!
Well, I was deeply moved by that, especially the part about the professional therapists. I figured Shadow Torture Lockjaw was supposed to represent, like, his inner demons, but it's also giving him this awesome motivational pep talk. This is also listed as a bad ending, even though it struck me as fairly hopeful. Then in the next one, Cassidy shows up and, like, berates him for spending too much time with his girlfriend and ignoring everyone else, and then she banishes her to the Shadow Realm. I don't know why Cassidy is part of this story now, but okay, I guess. The next one is just that scene of the book where Allison finds the 3 employees in the forbidden area and they die in the suits. We already read this one, so I won't go over it again. Okay, this one is called Please Die, so that's rude. Apparently, if you broke the torture device, which was that big palm tree looking thing from a long time ago, you get this ending, which is just the Lockjaw kid and it says, please die. It's not a very nice thing to say. This is called the special ending, even though it's actually kind of boring. If you break the evil machine they stole from Gilbert facility, all the plushies just sit around the Lockjaw kid and they're like, we care about you, don't kill yourself, and then it ends. There's an ending that happens if you put in the iconic CD plus code from FNAF 1 and 2, which just calls you a cheater. And then lastly, there's a really ominous ending called the photograph ending, which is only alleged to have existed. Apparently, near the end of the game, there was a fake wall you could pass through, and if you went in, you'd see a bunch of pictures that the developer describing it wasn't allowed to name, which is really creepy. After that, your game would crash and it would be permanently bricked unless you did a factory reset, so that's disturbing. So again, I have to say, quite the anticlimax. And far be it for me to expect something comprehensible out of this series, but wasn't it clearly set up so the finale would end with Allison dying once and for all to fulfill the prophecy? Like, in a story this juvenile, I kind of expected it to end with Allison exploding in a brilliant corona of light, but also it's so insistent on being edgy and nihilistic that I'm equally surprised that it didn't end with Carson exploding into a pile of guts and the prophecy continues ad infinitum. Okay, so I found Allison's wiki page now, and it seems like in the prequel game he did in fact explode into a pile of guts, for a reason I cannot discern for the life of me. Also, hilariously, it seems like this game was trying to give Allison a sympathetic backstory, which is ridiculous considering how insanely and unnecessarily evil he is. Guys, sometimes you can just let villains be villains. It's like in regular FNAF how William is a literal puppy murderer, but people still try to affix a tragic backstory onto him. Again, I don't know why I'm so enamored with the Return to Freddy's. It feels like a relic of a FNAF from days past, a more earnest time, when the fandom consisted largely of 11-year-olds who wanted to contribute to FNAF with their shitty edits and shitty models and shitty games. Yes, I'm definitely referring to myself here. As time has gone on, the fandom standard of quality has increased, and fan games have become more and more impressive, graphics, gameplay, and story-wise. But the Return to Freddy is expected to cross the finish line with the rest of them, using blocky Blender models, very derivative mechanics, and an incomprehensible mess of a story. And I don't know, something about that's just kind of beautiful to me, I guess. It's just so earnest, like I said. I think another aspect I relate to is just the graveyard of ideas that were always clearly a pipe dream. There's so many iterations of the Return to Freddy's 5 that were clearly biting off way more than they could chew. So many pages with "is a cancelled game" in the intro paragraph. Like, in the Return to Freddy's 5 development timeline, its earliest draft is described as being inspired by the likes of Amnesia and Alien. In the words of Billy Joel, dream on, but don't imagine they'll all come true. Just temper your expectations. It's a feeling I can relate to. I have a chronic case of working on too many projects at once, many of which would require my undivided attention to fully realize. As a child with undiagnosed ADHD, you can imagine that problem was even worse when I had boatloads of stupid ideas and no means by which to create them. Now I have boatloads of stupid ideas and a cool computer, which is why you're watching this video right now. So in conclusion, I think I do know why I love the Return to Freddy's. I feel a deep kinship with it. The child in my heart never gave up on the dream of my fan game trilogy ending with the animatronics named after my cousins having a final showdown with GLaDOS Ennard. I now wish that I, too, wrote that in a book and published it, because there's just a deep sense of passion behind it all. I don't love the Return to Freddy's in spite of its flaws, I love it because of them. Thank you all for watching this stupid video. Hopefully you all found this story as entertaining as I do. If you were intrigued by any of the passages I included in this video, I will link the story in the description because watching this video will not have taken away from your enjoyment of it at all. Even when the plot is normal, well, relatively normal I guess, the actual writing is so funny that the whole thing is worth reading. I just showed off the funniest specific passages. As for my next project, it's actually not FNAF related, but it is kind of FNAF adjacent. It's another scary internet thing involving child kidnapping. It's something that I've wanted to cover for a long time, but it's an absolute monster to analyze, which is why it's taken so long to get around to it. It's actually so massive that I'm gonna split it into 3 parts. As to avoid saturation, I'll probably stagger them, so there's gonna be a FNAF video in between each of those parts. Also, by the time this video comes out, it should be on or around the 10-year anniversary of Five Nights at Freddy's, which is absolutely insane. FNAF has been a major part of my life for more time than it hasn't now, and it has changed me as a person irreversibly in so many ways. Mostly good ones. This video is incredibly stupid, and it feels like kind of a disservice to discuss it here, but I'll probably make a community post about it. Other than that, though, I think that's all I have to say. Again, thank you so much for watching this stupid video. If you enjoyed it, maybe leave a like, leave a comment, maybe even subscribe if you're feeling a bit frisky. I love you all, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.